watching the WION-VOA Co-Production with me, Alison LaGrange. Now, as President Joe Biden and his cabinet fanned out across the U.S. this week to promote his agenda, House Republicans launched investigations into his administration. With the 118th Congress now underway, VOA's Congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson previews the GOP concerns about immigration, political favoritism and the handling of classified documents. Listen in.
A Republican majority U.S. House of Representatives was sworn in last month.
That you take this obligation freely,
ushering in a new era of divided government in Washington, D.C. And with it, Republicans pledging to fulfill Congress's role of oversight of the White House.
I do not think any American believes that justice should not be equal to all. And we found from this administration what happened before every single election, whatever comes out that they utilize to try to falsify it, they try to have different standards for their own beliefs. That doesn't work in America.
Republicans argue the Biden administration has abused its powers, from the way it has handled mass migration at America's southern border.
Month after month after month, we have set records for migrants coming into the country. And frankly, I think it's intentional. I don't know how anyone with common sense or logic can reach any other conclusion. It seems deliberate. It seems premeditated.
To the alleged weaponization of the federal government for political purposes.
We're going to be returning this committee to its core mission, and that is to ensure that taxpayer dollars are not being mismanaged, abused, or wasted. To shine a light in the darkness of the federal bureaucracy to prevent corruption and self-dealing. To make sure our federal government is working efficiently for the American people.
Republicans also plan investigations into the president's own family, including accusations his son Hunter Biden improperly benefited from his father's positions. Oversight of the executive branch is a key part of Congress's role, and analysts say these investigations are common when the U.S. government has divided party rule.
Even in a polarized era, congressional investigation can do some good, but in order for it to have a truly beneficial impact, both parties have to cooperate.
But Democrats say the probes will unfairly target the president.
And it's very unfortunate that we've seen this extreme MAGA Republican agenda, which is apparently anchored in impeachment and investigation, focused on witch hunts, not working families.
Any legislative fixes that come out of the House hearings won't be passed in the Democratic-controlled U.S. Senate.
There's a broad realm here for lawmakers to use this subpoena power to force people to come to speak to them, even though no one expects a real legislative change to occur because of those investigations.
The discovery of classified documents at Biden's residence will also prompt a House investigation. One Republicans hope will keep the focus on the president ahead of the 2024 elections.
Congressional investigations, we can show historically, do dampen presidential approval, right? They can really tarnish what the public thinks about the president.
The first subpoenas stemming from House investigations of the Biden Justice Department were issued last week. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Joining us now with more analysis is VOA's correspondent Jessica Stone. She joins us live from the White House. Hello to you, Jessica. Now, members of Congress started a series of hearings this week to investigate Washington's handling of the Chinese spy balloon. A U.S. Air Force fighter shot it down over the weekend off the East Coast, days after it was first spotted over Montana. What have we learned?
Yeah, it's not every day, Allison, that when you watch one of these congressional hearings, you learn so much about not only the sentiment of Congress about how this was handled, both Republicans and Democrats vigorously questioning these three defense officials, particularly in the Senate appropriations hearing yesterday. And what these defense officials say is that this is all part of a Chinese military spy program. They say that they have very good guesses as to what types of information this balloon balloon was trying to collect. And they also said that there are two advantages of a balloon over a satellite, because, of course, for many Americans, this is the first time we have become aware that there is such a thing as a spy balloon. They say, listen, it's able to hover over a finite amount of space for longer and do more intelligence gathering. And also it's much cheaper than a satellite, because we know that the Chinese and the Americans and many other countries have intelligence gathering satellites over other countries. Now, these defense officials, as I said, took very tough questions, particularly on the idea of why they would wait 4 days allowing a foreign object that they knew was intelligence gathering into U.S. airspace for 4 days and not just shoot it down the moment it crossed into airspace. Some senators really questioned whether that would set a dangerous precedent with the Chinese government. The officials maintained they did so, they delayed to keep Americans safe, and they also said this. They said it made recovering the balloon's contents and components easier, because had they shot it down, for example, over the Pacific Ocean, that is deeper and colder, and the currents are stronger than where it was ultimately shot down over the Atlantic Ocean.
Right. Now, the House Republicans are also launching an investigation into one of their own. Congressman George Santos is now the subject of a House Ethics Committee examination. He faces increasing calls for him to resign over concerns about his campaign spending and fabricating his professional and personal past.
Yeah, add to that, because earlier in the week we had the confirmation from House Speaker Kevin McCarthy that Republicans would launch that ethics investigation. Well, yesterday we learned that the Democrats are offering a resolution to call for his resignation and his removal from Congress. And then you might remember these pictures: Senator Mitt Romney publicly confronting George Santos, a Republican to Republican, on the Senate floor there in front, or the House floor, I should say, where the State of the Union had just taken place, calling him not fit to serve, not deserving to be there, and asking him to resign. Now, if that ethics panel finds any wrongdoing, it will lead to George Santos's removal from Congress. And this is really the first indication that the Republicans are willing to do this type of investigation. As we've talked about previously, George Santos is among that narrow majority that's giving House Speaker Kevin McCarthy his speakership. And so he does play an important role in that sense. But, when it comes to resignation, he has no interest. He has repeatedly denied that he would seek resignation. Kevin McCarthy has not asked for his resignation, but his constituents do think he should resign. And this is going to undermine the argument that Kevin McCarthy says that he has, which is he doesn't want to undermine the will of the voters by removing Santos prematurely. Well, right now we're seeing polling from Santos's district that say a majority of his constituents want to see him resign. Allison?
Right, Jessica, stay with us while we take a look at our next story. The U.S. is facing a severe egg shortage caused primarily by a deadly outbreak of avian flu. It's prompting a flood of unusual contraband at the U.S.-Mexico border, fresh eggs. Now, Cesar Contreras gives you the details of the story, narrated by Veronica Villafane. Listen in.
The sharp rise in egg prices in the United States has prompted some who regularly traverse America's southern border to buy eggs at lower prices in Mexico and try to smuggle them north.
Over the last 3 months, we have noticed an increase of about 108% in seizures of fresh chicken products, specifically fresh eggs. That's what has been confiscated the most, coming in from Juarez into El Paso.
In Texas, Arizona, and California, agents have seized large quantities of contraband eggs in recent months. Egg prices have soared as an outbreak of avian influenza decimated poultry in the U.S. at a time when Americans are eating more of the protein-rich food. But buying cheaper eggs in Mexico and smuggling them across the border can be costly. Those who are caught face steep fines.
If you're going to bring them in and don't declare it, 1, they'll be confiscated, and 2, you'll get a $300 fine for the first offense. A second offense can land you a $1,000 fine.
U.S.-based consumers like Julio Rangel understand the pain of high food prices, but he says people should follow the rules.
The
fine makes sense, because we can bring parasites or other diseases from the eggs brought from Mexico. We have to deal with it and adapt like when gas prices went up.
The price of eggs in the U.S. has gone from just under $2 per dozen to as much as $5. In Mexico, eggs cost roughly half what Americans are paying. Customs and Border Protection officials say illegal egg shipments intended to be sold in the U.S. could trigger fines of $10,000. For César Contreras in El Paso, Texas, Veronica Villafañe, VOA News.
Now, still with us is VOA's correspondent Jessica Stone, joining us live from the White House. Now, much of President Biden's State of the Union address this week, as well as his public appearances since then, have been focused on the economy. How is that playing out in his public appearances? And what does polling tell us about how the American public sees his message?
Well, late last year, we saw some Gallup polling that indicated 70% of Americans believe that the economy is set to just get worse. So going into the State of the Union address, the president's approval rating was one of his lowest, 45%. And so far, we have not seen early polling indicate that he got much of a bump out of the State of the Union. So as he goes out to the public to make his case that he does deserve a second term, even before he declares his candidacy, he is delivering two messages. Number one, he's speaking directly to working class voters, and that's specifically important because, of course, these are the folks that supported Donald Trump in his presidency, and they also normally form the backbone of the Democratic Party in many ways, but in this case, they're very vulnerable to other messages because they are disappointed with the economy. So he is going to tell them repeatedly, I created jobs under my administration, and secondly, the Republicans, if you put them in office, they're going to cut major social safety programs like Social Security, which is for retirees, and Medicare, Medicaid, which is for those retirees, and particularly when they get ill. He's delivering these messages in particularly high groups of senior citizens. And sorry about the noise behind me. We have some construction here at the White House. But he is delivering that in Wisconsin and Florida this week. And keep in mind, Florida has the largest population of senior citizens in the country. It's also the home of Governor Ron DeSantis, who is widely believed to be expected to run for the Republican nomination in 2024. Allison?
So, Jessica, President Biden is widely expected to run again. When will he announce, and what's the latest on the rest of the 2024 presidential election field?
Well, we do anticipate that Joe Biden will announce his re-election bid in the next few weeks. We don't have anything more specific than that, but you can definitely tell that he's building his case as he singles out those working class voters in Wisconsin, in Florida, and in other places we expect him to travel. As for his Republican opponents, we do expect to get another announcement next week from Nikki Haley. You may remember that she was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations under Donald Trump. She was also a South Carolina governor. She's expected to announce her candidacy next week. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is also expected, as we said, to be in the running, but we don't anticipate he will announce his candidacy until sometime later this spring after the Florida Assembly goes to rest. Former President Donald Trump, of course, is the first person to throw his hat in the ring, announcing a couple of months ago he's just started to campaign, and of course he did give a fiery but brief response to Joe Biden's State of the Union address on Tuesday night. Allison?
All right, Jessica, as always, great to speak to you. Thanks for being with us.